The Big Ten, more like the big tent that everyone seems to pitch whenever I come out with one of these. Today we're going to talk about the 10 biggest megacorporations that exist in the Shadowrun setting, or at least we will do it as per what the newest point is in the Shadowrun setting, because obviously in a setting that spans many decades of basically economic warfare, some of them are bound to go under. But first, a note. The Big Ten are the Big Ten because they appear everywhere and anywhere, but they don't have to. Of course they comprise a big portion of the Shadowruns that happen, but they are only the AAA megacorporations which have a seat on the corporate council. There is a huge amount of other massive and incredibly powerful multinational corporations in the Shadowrun setting also, that can act as Johnsons. Not to mention, you have countless subsidiaries, the interests of which might actually even sometimes run counter to their parent corporation, and the parent corporation itself is often a house divided. I'm not saying don't use the Big Ten as Johnsons, because you definitely should. I'm just saying maybe don't do it all the time. But on that note, what even is a Big Ten? Well, there came a point where megacorporations had become so huge that no government could control them or regulate them in any meaningful manner. And at that point, the underground warfare between them sort of escalated to the point where it was seriously hurting the bottom line. So 7 of these corporations, namely Ares Industries, BMW, JRJ International, Karuba, Mitsuhama Computer Technologies, Oro, and the Shiawase Corporation, banded together to form the organization that would eventually become the Corporate Court. Basically, it's a regulatory body owned by these corporations that exists above the laws of the mortal world. Literally, by the way, they sit in a space station called Zurich Orbital. Even if they don't necessarily have any direct authority over anything that happens in the world, similar to the way that the UN does, they do represent the bundled power of the biggest megacorporations in the world, so unlike the UN, basically what they say goes is better than any national law. And the Big Ten are those corporations that have a seat at this council, and the council itself decides what corporations have a seat at the council. And I'm going to give you a rundown of all of these 10, but keep in mind that though they all specialize in something or some things, they are so huge that they basically have their fingers in every sector of industry that you can imagine. Ares Macrotechnology, headquartered in Detroit, is a real American star-spangled apple pie kind of corporation. They are the twisted love child of a revitalized automotive industry and the military-industrial complex, and absolutely dominate the aerospace and defense sectors. Though they certainly style themselves as being true patriots of the United American and Canadian states, they have absolutely no qualms selling weapons to their direct rivals, because after all, it is money. The corporate structure and also culture sort of bridges the gap between rugged individualist libertarianism and also basically being a paramilitary organization with very rigid command hierarchies. I mean, they also own a handful of actual literal paramilitary groups, and most of those will fuck you up because Ares does not care about morals or ethics. They just want people to think that they do. At the end of the day, to Ares, might makes right, and they will destroy anything that fucks with their bottom line, usually by means of projecting overwhelming force and destroying without any regard for collateral damage. It's almost as though they were modeled after some kind of real country. Aztechnology, headquartered in Tenochtitlan, which in our time is known as Mexico City, is the de facto government of Aztlan, one of the world's foremost superpowers. They used to be known as Oro, which was basically a bunch of drug cartels saying, we should go legit and just own Mexico, before rebranding themselves and the entire country in the process. Unless you're one of their trusted runner teams, which will require you to have a very particular kind of moral compass, mainly none, you will probably not know that you are working for Aztechnology as a Shadowrunner. As corporations go, even among Shadowrunners, who are literally professional, underground, illegal mercenaries that take care of white-collar criminals' dirty work for a living, even among them, Aztechnology is considered to be a very special kind of evil. To Aztechnology, the profits always justify the means. Be those means the total and complete surveillance of their entire enslaved workforce, or literal, actual human sacrifice in order to do blood magic. Which is why they've come to rely on a certain amount of discretion while operating internationally, which is a shame really, because they have this really cool techno Aztechnology aesthetic where they have these like pyramids with the glowy things and the snakes and the stone reliefs, but they also glow in a different... You can imagine what I'm saying, probably. Of all the Shadowrun corporations, I think their aesthetic is the most distinctive. Evo, headquartered in Vladivostok, is the megacorporation that really wants to prove to the world that it is not racist anymore. Their biggest sectors are in biotechnology of all kinds, including SimSense and cyberware, and consumer products designed to be friendly to all the various kinds of metahumans. They used to be headquartered in Japan and known as Yamatetsu, and let me tell you, of all the very racist Japanese megacorps, they were the worst. But after some serious reforms that actually have been like a while ago now, in terms of moral quandaries, they are the opposite of Aztechnology. Everybody likes to work for them, especially Shadowrunners, because they get treated well, they have valued expertise, and even if you run against them, which is also something that Shadowrunners like to do, chances are if you fail, as long as you did a good job, they might even offer you a position at the company. The corporate structure is set up in a way that they can always get the most profit out of every individual person. And they do this by focusing on the individual talents of each employee that they sort of try to recognize and then put up a bunch of corporate money if they feel it is warranted and give them some leeway in what they can do. No other Big Ten company invests this much into research and development, and a lot of the scientifically and engineeringly minded actually really enjoy working for them. The Horizon Group, headquartered in Los Angeles, is the smallest of the Big Ten, which still makes them huge. Their primary expertise is, unsurprisingly, media of all kinds, but they also have a good foothold in communications technology. Horizon is even more concerned with harnessing talent as much as possible than Evo is, and they do this by what they call the consensus, which is basically a form of workplace democracy where they poll all of their workers every single day on some essential questions, and this polling verifiably has a big impact on how the corporation behaves. Working for them comes with a bit more stability than working for most other corporations, but while that sounds nice, it does come with the price tag of basically the corporate ladder being tied to a sort of social credit system. You know this trope of Hollywood people always being just incessantly nice and friendly to everyone that they hate? The Sopranos episode Luxury Lounge, which I think may well be my favorite, does a really good job at portraying this. That is what the corporate culture at Horizon is like. Everywhere. Shadowrunners do tend to love working for Horizon though, not only because the Johnsons will usually meet you in fancy nightclubs, but also because they will actually involve themselves in your work and try to get you the tools and the contacts that you need to get the job done. And of course, there's the complementary cocaine. Mitsuhama Computer Technologies, headquartered in Kyoto, have a very broad portfolio, making most of their money in entertainment media, robotics, heavy industry, and magic. Of all the Japanese megacorps, they are the most intertwined with the Yakuza, so much so that a branch of the Yakuza owns a huge portion of the corporation. Mitsuhama has a very unusual relationship with Shadowrunners because when they hire them, they usually have a very meticulously detailed plan of an exact order in which exact things are supposed to happen to the letter. And if you're doing a run against Mitsuhama, you better not make a single mistake, because they will straight up murder you if they catch a single whiff of you. That is their explicit policy of how they deal with Shadowrunners. They have absolutely zero tolerance for them, and it's been very good as a deterrent. In terms of their politics, Mitsuhama are very much in favor of Japanese imperialism and lobby hard to keep anything that they can't control tightly regulated. This includes metahumans, which, in case you didn't know this, they are in an especially bad spot in Japan. Renraku Computer Systems, headquartered in Tokyo, is pretty much guaranteed to have manufactured something in your computer, if not most of it. And the software running on your computer probably includes a lot of Renraku code. They are the youngest of the corporations on the corporate council, and their seat there stems from having purchased a Slovenian weapons manufacturer named Karuba, which, hilariously, Renraku as such is also the most balkanized of all the big 10 megacorporations, usually deferring much of the work and responsibility to the local subsidiaries and the local umbrella companies that they use to handle things. One of the most iconic things that Renraku does is build these massive arcologies, which are essentially corporate cities that can be entirely self-sufficient and just completely isolate themselves from the world and be fine, which is exactly what happened when an AI that was controlling the whole thing went rogue in their Seattle arcology a while ago. Except for the minor distinction that they were actually not fine at all. If you are a Shadowrunner, you might want to get acquainted with their other iconic institution, the corporate police known as the Renraku Red Samurai. Or rather, you would want to do the exact opposite of that and steer clear of them at all costs, because, and I'm not sure if I read this on the Shadowrun subreddit or in one of the actual books, but basically the relationship is the Renraku Red Samurai are the wife and you, the Shadowrunner, are the girlfriend. Saeder-Krupp, headquartered in Essen, is the biggest of the Big Ten, dominating the heavy industry sector as well as the exploitation of natural resources. They also make a lot of guns and are owned by a fucking dragon who is in fact the wealthiest person in the world. The entirety of Saeder-Krupp is structured in a way that will give Lofir as much control about each individual part of it as he wants at any given time. So he can completely take over direct command of some section of it, while the rest of the company runs itself. The worm runs the company more like a country, really, offering generous wages, good health insurance, pensions to people. There's also a wealth of educational and entertainment programs that all corporate citizens of Saeder-Krupp have access to, and this sort of instills in people a sense of patriotism. But that country is an absolute monarchy, and you only get to have a will of your own until the exact point where Lofir decides that you are supposed to burn all of the corporate contacts you have made throughout your entire career in order to achieve some arcane goal of his that he will not bother explaining to you because you wouldn't understand it anyway. The alternative that you have is to get eaten by a dragon. None of the other corporations in the whole world like Saeder-Krupp. In fact, they will often attempt to foil Lofir's plans, if they even so much as barely understand them, at every juncture, because he doesn't care about being loyal to the people he does business with. And these are not the kinds of organizations that like to feel like they're being used. The Shiawase Corporation, headquartered in Osaka, is ancient in Sixth World terms, and they make a lot of money in the service industry, as well as biotechnology and heavy industry, all led by a dynasty that is deeply intertwined with Japanese royalty. There is a mystical quality to Shiawase. They are very enamored with the aesthetics of Japanese values, and they actually, if you want to work for them, no matter in the world where you are, you have to convert to Shintoism. That is a requirement that you have to do it. Sometimes you also get to keep your original faith, but you definitely have to convert to Shintoism. So here's an interesting paradoxical conundrum, the likes of which usually only reality itself gets to make. But we've already alluded to Japan being just an extremely racist a super empire that exploits anyone who can even remotely be exploited. The emperor isn't just a figurehead, as he is or has been throughout like the big periods of Japanese history that we in the West like to concern ourselves with, but he's the actual big boss man, and he's propped up in terms of money and ideology by most of the Japanocores. Except Shiawase, who take the very progressive stance of maybe we should only oppress some of the minorities some of the time, and then gradually wean ourselves off of doing that altogether. But the emperor's wife is actually the head of the board of directors of the Shiawase Corporation. So that sort of tempers the darker ambitions that he has. You couldn't make this up, except they did. Spinrad Global, headquartered in Lisbon, is the most recent addition to the corporate council, specializing in high-end cyberware, fashion, and land development, also fueled by a fuck ton of oil money and military might via the corporate merger of Spinrad Industries with Global Sandstorm. Johnny Spinrad is to Spinrad what Lofir is to Saeder-Krupp, except he's more like a human and not a dragon. And also he is seen by the public more as like a genius Elon Musk type figure, instead of like a shifty, oppressive Jeff Bezos type figure. Originally from Switzerland, Johnny Spinrad is known as an international playboy who has fucked all kinds of royalty, princesses, baronesses, countesses, corporate royalty that isn't formal royalty. He was engaged to the now Queen of England for a while. Not the one in the Shadowrun now, not this, that would be weird. He also lives an incredibly dangerous and exciting lifestyle full of all kinds of thrill-seeking imaginable, which makes him a perfect PR poster boy for the corporation as such, because despite the many accidents he is involved in very often, he is still alive and kicking thanks to Spinrad prosthetics and cyberware. Wuxing Incorporated, headquartered in Hong Kong, is primarily associated with the global logistics industry, wherein they have a dominant market position, but they also are very active in the fields of magic, and really magic plays a key role in how they run the company. Geomancy, feng shui, and controlling the flow of qi so they will make as much profit as possible is something that they have mastered like no other. There is actually in the video game Shadowrun Hong Kong a mission where you have to break into their headquarters and make minor disturbances to the flow of qi, so they will lose money. There is also a certain flow of information, cash, and personnel between Wuxing and the Triads, who launder their money at Wuxing-owned banks, and especially in Hong Kong act as a sort of social enforcement arm to make sure that everyone in the company really does what they're supposed to do. They're actually very agreeable from a corporate standpoint because they're not very aggressive or expansionist. But those times where they do offer Shadowrunners some work, they give good pay, but you can often also choose to get paid in a voucher that is basically like a global taxi. Because Shadowrunners, being what they are, have a difficult time traveling around the world. But if you cash in one of these vouchers, Wuxing will basically transport you from any point in the world to any other point in the world, few questions asked. And that is worth more than money. Anyway, that was a quick overview of the big 10 megacorporations in Shadowrun. Obviously, it's really just a quick overview. These are all huge organizations, and I could basically make a video on each of them separately, which I will not do. I don't have the time to get all the content I want to create as it is. But this should give you a good idea as to which ones you find the most interesting and which what you want to look into some more, which I very much encourage you to do. But obviously you always have some degree of creative leeway when working with them in your game. Thank you very much for watching this Shadowrun lore thing. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Subscribestar or Patreon, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, go read up on some Shadowrun lore. And see you around, cunts.